Welcome back. We continue our discussion with Dr. Zeinab Nawar, Professor of Economics, on the impact of the climate change on the economy of the countries around the world. Well, Dr. Nawar, we were just speaking about the COP27 climate change conference that Egypt is about to host next November in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Yes, of course. We just continuing our talk saying that yes, this will add to, of course, to our economy, some sort of marketing for Sharm el-Sheikh and marketing also for Egypt. In addition, of course, that the conference will be tackling the main economic issues related to climate change, which is very important. There are a lot of expectations, a lot of estimates. That is not good estimates, saying that if we are continuing the same behavior that we do as humans and as governments, so there are expectations that there will be a decline of the GDP by 20% by 2050. And also some of the economists, they are trying just to calculate the amount of losses that had occurred 40, 50 years ago. They said that maybe we have about $40 trillion as losses because of the climate change. So we can imagine that if there is no what we can say agreed whatever agreements, agreed agendas, and also implementation of what they had agreed on. I'm talking about the presidents of the world and the leading countries. So I think that we are, as humans, we will be at risk. So the importance of this conference, that there should be an agreed points, there should be also implemented actions, and this is what the civil society around the world asking the world leaders that should be done during this conference, because the world and even humans are they were fed out of a lot of talks, a lot of nice wordings, a lot of promises, and what about the actions that will be for the sake of the countries of the world? So maybe this is the load that we are going to have it for this conference from the President. The Sisi try to convince and try to bring different talks and try also to gather all of these world presidents and civil societies and leaders and all of those important players, important world players, to come together, and they should share agreed points and they should agree on these actions and implement it.
Yes. Doctor, how does the climate change affect the world economy?
Of course, it affects in the world economy in every and each country. I had read recently that along the 40, 50 years ago, it was mainly the countries that were affected, the US, India, China, Argentina, but I see that all of the countries are affected by the climate change.
Yes.
Why? Because the climate change means changing the temperature of the, what we can say, of our world.
Yes.
So this means that changes in our health, changes in the epidemics, changes in the water flow, changes even in the agricultural production, changes in the animal species and also the oceans. So all of the economic activities of our lives are being affected on daily basis because of the climate change. All of these changes that we are seeing now in terms of animal species everywhere, change in production of agricultural production, and we are now in the time of Corona,
yes, yeah.
and the time of the scarcity of resources. So the climate change is adding more and more to the pressures of the economic production and economic activities. So we are at a time that we are not happy of all of these different actions and different crises that we are witnessing now. So now with the climate change, this means a lot to the humanity. So there should be an actions to sustain the economic development and to prevent any negative GDP growth, because we will not having a positive, we will have a negative. Means that we may work, we may have an economic activity and output, but at a negative way. So this means that we are not producing enough, this means that we are not growing, this means that a lot of us needs, and a lot of mouths need to be fed, and there is no enough food, there is no enough money, there is no enough resources because of the climate change.
Yes, yes. Dr. Nawar, what are the steps that the world should take in order to face the impact of the climate change, its impact on the economy that threatens the whole world?
A lot of steps that have been declared for before, but again, once again, what about the implementation? Of course, one of the most important steps that should be taken is to increase the use of renewable energy, and forget about the use of the fossil fuels for a while, and focus on the renewable energy in terms of, if you talk about wind energy,
Yes.
other sources, the recycling of the wastes. All of this, of course, will have a role in decreasing this huge pollution and this huge increase in the temperature of the world. So a lot of steps have been taken, but by a lot of countries, a lot of initiatives also for the use of the renewable energy sources, the different sources of the renewable energy. And I think that most of the countries around the world, they are working on this, except, of course, the less developed ones. If we talk about Africa, if we talk about poor countries in different parts of the world, they may not be able to use this type of renewable energy,
Yes.
because, again, renewable energy needs innovation and needs some sort of technology for
Yes.
its use. If you talk about small, not advanced technology, but there should be some sort of innovation and some sort of technology and some sort of science also behind the use of the renewable energy. So I think most of the world countries are taking steps toward the use of renewable energy. Also, some precautions related to the several industries. Some of the developed countries, they stopped totally producing and manufacturing some industries that are increasing the pollution, and also would enhance the level of, what we can say, again, the increase of the temperature of our world. So yes, some countries or even most of the countries had taken a lot of good and active steps, but still more and more actions needed, especially from the less developing world.
Yes.
The less developing world and the less developed countries, especially in Africa, those are now the most suffering countries in the world.
But let me say, you are saying that those are the most suffering countries here in Africa. But what if we say the idea of, or think about that Africa, Egypt, and Egypt as part of Africa, the African countries have natural resources.
Yes.
Would this help with the facing the climate change?
Yes.
Because Africa is rich with the natural resources,
Yes.
which most of the countries of the world does not have.
Of course, being rich in the natural resources and being one of the important continents along the history,
yes.
you know, the African continent is one of the most important continents for the extraction for all the types of minerals along the history.
Yes.
But this does not mean that they are developed, because once you are just extracting the raw material and exporting the raw material and the minerals, and you are not working on industrialization, this does not mean that you are developed. Of course, this is not the means of developing. Developing means that you do an extraction of this raw material and you manufacture this product inside Africa and inside the country.
So it's kind of dealing with these
and of course, the degree of
perfectly dealing with the natural resources, you mean?
Yes. Being rich with the natural resources does not mean that you are developed. Being rich with the natural resources, this means that you have a gift from the God, plus other actions you have to do. If you didn't work on the other actions, so you have a gift from the God that you didn't use. But what happened also, that others are going to use it instead of you, and this is what happened with the Western world and the developed countries. They are using Africa, and they are getting all of these minerals and they're getting all of these raw materials and giving a minimum benefits to the countries itself.
Yes.
Plus, what we do have, the degree of political instability.
Yes.
So I'm sorry to tell you that Africa is a very rich country, but we have a lot of problems. This is why the countries of Africa are not developed enough. And this is why they are the most countries, they are suffering from the climate change, because they didn't work on the proper steps. They don't have these actions and policies that would prevent and would lessen this effect of climate change on their countries.
Yes. So having a certain plan to face this impact of the climate change is very important for all the countries, especially Africa, you mean?
Yes, very important. Why? Because if you didn't work on these steps, especially for the least developed countries, means more poverty, and we don't want more poverty to occur in societies. We have a lot of, the world is going to face depression because of the war between Ukraine and Russia, and we have also still again and once again corona epidemic, and then we have also climate change. So a lot of devastating effects that it would lead to more poverty in societies that we want to prevent as much as we can. For the world leaders,
Yes, yes.
should be on their agenda and top agenda.
Yes.
To be dealt with.
Yes, Dr. Nawar, what would be high on the agenda of the conference coming up in November, hosted by Egypt on the climate change, the COP27? What would be the main topics that are going to be discussed, and what do we expect from this conference? What would be the outcome and the recommendations?
Yes, the conference will be a platform that will be bringing most of the experts, world leaders, and also experts who will talk about the effect of the climate change on the worldwide economy. And also they would suggest proper plans and proper actions to be done to deal with the climate change. And also, I think there will be a lot of debate with China and with the US and with also UK about the effect of climate change. I mean, there will be some sort of debate and trying to convince the industrialized nations, if you talk about the most and the newly industrialized one like China, like India, and also with the old industrialized countries like US and UK, to talk about more steps to be taken and more agreement on more steps also once again to be taken to deal with the climate change.
Yes.
Because there are still a lot of talk and a lot of pressure on these economies and on these countries to lessen the degree of pollution, to try to work on proper actions to prevent the world. Still we see that the developed and the industrialized world are one of the main and major reasons of the climate change.
Yes.
So there will be a lot of talks, there will be a lot of pressure on these industrialized nations to take more precautions and to take more actions. And this is what will be the important result and the major result of this conference. If the world leaders, along with the world expert, had agreed on several steps and it had been implemented successfully, I think this would be the success of the conference.
Yes, yes. Dr. Nawar, do you think that the threat of the climate change and its effect on the whole world and especially on the economy would make the world come together and unite together in order to help other countries, as you've just said, developing countries to lift the pressure and the burden of these countries?
We hope that will happen, but unfortunately, I will tell you what's going wrong these days because of what we do have in terms of the crisis. And in this case, we have it because of the war between Russia and Ukraine. Yes. And all the countries are now suffering in terms of the availability of resources. And of course, you know, the energy problem between Russia and Europe. So I think there is a window of a chance that the world would agree and the world leaders would agree on certain steps. But also I see other maybe things that would not help us in this scene because of what the world is witnessing nowadays from a lot of crisis and a lot of economic issues, food scarcity and all of this. Maybe the world now and the world leaders are focusing on other aspects that would, yes, climate change is a fatal issue and is a fatal thing that had to be done and dealt with. Actions need to be done and also actions need to be agreed on. But other actions, other political tensions maybe now on the top, on the world scene. And this is maybe one of the things that will not, maybe this would happen, that we will not reach a degree of agreement because of this type of crisis and political instability the world is witnessing. But we do hope, once again, that the conference would bring the most and also would bring one of the most important leaders and one of the most important experts to talk together and also to do some sort of pressure on those to do the proper actions as possible.
Yes. Doctor, could you give us your insight about the picture that we could see in the coming future, in the coming 30 or 50 years? What would be the economy of some countries, as some countries in the world are going to suffer from the, for example, the disappearance of some cities? The beaches of some countries are going, to come. They would face a real problem. So could you give us your insight? How do you see the future picture?
Yeah, if we allow this to continue to happen, if we allow that more pollution and there will not be proper steps, I think we'll be in crisis. Because when we say that the climate change and all of this changing in the nature that is happening, it has a lot of devastating effects that we cannot imagine. It's not about that the flows of water, it's not about, yes, we see the scene itself, but what is behind the scene is a catastrophe. Human lives, animal lives changing in the nature, changing in the plants and animals, means changing in everything that is surrounding us. So you can imagine the huge amount of crisis that we would be in if we didn't take the proper action, if we didn't depend on technology, if we didn't depend on renewable energy, clean technology, if we didn't allow for more finance tools to encourage industries and companies to use clean technology, we will be in crisis.
Yes, yes. I thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your valuable information, Dr. Zeinab Nawar, Professor of Economics.
Thank you so much. Thank you, my dear. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for following us in this segment. Please stay tuned for more in The Breakfast Show.